Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Bhāvanā in conversation with present day leading mathematicians from around the world. In conversation we have with us Professor M.S. Raghunathan. Professor, welcome to Bhāvanā.
Thank you.
And your first thoughts on this singular occasion?
Well, this MTTS has been a very good activity for development of mathematics in this country. In the state where our education at the degree level, at the graduate level, has not been particularly good over the last several years, this has come as a boon to students in bachelor's and master's degree classes. Kumaresan has done a marvelous job of running this program over the last 25 years, and it has produced a number of good mathematicians, and general awareness of mathematics has gone up considerably in the mathematical student world. And so it's a very good initiative which has come a long way. It started in a small way, and now it is one of the major projects funded by the National Board for Higher Mathematics. And I am particularly happy because I was the first person to support this activity as chairman of the National Board.
Yes. Thank you. So in some sense we are indeed talking to the correct person as far as the genesis of MTTS goes. You mentioned just now that there are a few key points in the undergraduate mathematical education in India which have been points of bother, and what if you would be able to enumerate the key things where our students are seen to be lacking? What would they be?
Essentially the key thing is that the students do not get good instruction.
I see.
The problem is there has been a proliferation of undergraduate institutions, colleges. Basically they have become commercial propositions for people to make money, and they don't really pay attention to the quality of the teachers they hire and things of that kind. And the teachers have by and large not been good in most of the private colleges, for instance. There are some very good ones without question, but by and large many private colleges, the teachers have not been good, and so the students, even if they are interested in mathematics, are not taught properly, and at some point they may even lose interest, whatever interest they had to begin with. And what MTTS has done is to rescue some of these talented students, put them back into being interested in mathematics. There's essentially only one defect, namely poor instruction.
Otherwise you don't see a reason why Indian students vis-a-vis their counterparts abroad should not be doing well at all.
Poor instruction, of course, makes all the difference. That's the difference. I mean, you do find the students going abroad doing well there without question.
Exactly. So, since you said that MTTS has managed to do an admirable job of not only nurturing but actually identifying talent right at the nascent stage. Your very early memories of this program. Let's start right from the very beginning.
See, the program came about in the following fashion. A group of young mathematicians in the late 1980s had gathered together in some other connection, and they apparently got into discussion about the state of undergraduate education in the country, and felt strongly that something needs to be done. This feeling was also existing with the other people, but nobody had taken any concrete action. But this group came up with concrete ideas of how to go about doing something to ameliorate the situation. And Kumaresan was in the lead in this group, and he came up with a written document and made a proposal to the NBHM seeking financial support. And I happened to be the chairman when this proposal came up. In fact, he had talked to me informally about it, and I encouraged him to submit a formal proposal. And when it came up before the board, I decided to support it. The board decided to support it, and I was quite enthusiastic about it. And as it turned out, my enthusiasm was well placed.
So the proposal was opportune, both in its scope as well as at the time at which it was presented.
Absolutely.
It was. And you have been a mathematician at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research all your life, and you have been on record at various instances where you said that the French Bourbaki movement had a major influence on the flowering of mathematics in India. In some sense, though not exactly, could this be a Bourbaki led kind of math instruction in India, what Professor Kumaresan has achieved?
You see, the Bourbakis did not concentrate at the undergraduate level. They were more interested in the postgraduate situation.
Right.
So I cannot say that Kumarasan's ideas are inspired by the Bourbaki.
Right.
They might have had an indirect influence in the sense that Tata Institute, where he worked for some time, was certainly very much influenced by the Bourbaki spirit.
Right. Right.
And in fact, at the Tata Institute in the first year, the students were given courses which were really would have been undergraduate courses elsewhere.
Right.
Because elsewhere in the world. But since our students were not adequately prepared, we were forced to give undergraduate courses at the Tata Institute. And exposure to that perhaps had an influence on Kumarasan in the way he developed his program.
Right.
But beyond that, I cannot say that he was really directly influenced by the Bourbaki method or anything of that kind, because Bourbaki's concentration was on higher levels.
Higher level mathematics. Okay. Yeah. Were you involved in the pedagogical aspects of MTTS program?
No, not really.
Did you have any serious concrete inputs to the team which actually ran it on a daily basis?
Not at all.
Okay.
Any influence I may have had is entirely indirect. In so far as I had taught a few courses which Kumarasan took.
Right.
And he might have picked up something from me.
Okay.
He does say here he did, but beyond that I had no direct influence on the methodology of MTTS.
I see. So as far as the indirect influence goes, did you at any point of time later when the program was actually running bump into Professor Kumarasan and say, this could be done a little differently? Were there concrete inputs? Or
not at all.
Gentle steering of the course?
Absolutely none.
Absolutely none.
Absolutely none.
I see. Okay. So it's completely Professor Kumarasan and his team which ran the show.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Just because you have worked with the leading mathematicians of the world, interacted with them and collaborated with them, and from your experience of having worked with mathematicians across the world, was there any another program of this kind anywhere else in the world with a similar parallel?
I don't know if there's any. I'm not aware of anything like this kind. See, the point is, elsewhere, is there a need for this? You see, in the West, the advanced countries, usually universities, the undergraduate training is also done at the universities, not in affiliated colleges.
Correct.
And universities, many of them are old and have over the years built up a certain reputation. It's nothing new. Maybe the situation would have been something similar to what it was in our country if you go back 150 years or 200 years.
Yes.
When they were beginning to develop undergraduate, especially the US, for instance.
Correct.
They are beginning to develop undergraduate institutions. At that stage, they are likely to face this kind of difficulty. They would have had enough good experts. They would their recruitment methods may not have been right. So it's a different ball game at that time. Something like that would have been comparable to our situation, say 50 years ago. But so it's unlikely that you would have had a setup like MTTS elsewhere.
Yeah. In our previous conversations with Professor Seshadri, he had mentioned that when he went visiting Professor Rolbot in Harvard, he heard Professor Rolbot tell him that he had just come back teaching an undergraduate course on calculus, and that set Professor Seshadri thinking, what are we doing in India? So your thoughts on similar things? Well,
the thing is that in undergraduates are taught at universities, in all countries, practically all countries. So it's only in India that this, and maybe some place in England. The thing is this, when the first universities set up in India, they were modelled on London University. They were not modelled on Oxford or Cambridge. Oxford and Cambridge are residential universities where there are departments and students were being taught even at the undergraduate level. But not in London University. London University was simply an affiliating university. It was an examining body, nothing beyond. And there are a number of colleges which were affiliated to the university, and all the teaching was done in the colleges. And when the British set up our universities in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras, it is the London model they took. So there were no departments. They were examining bodies, and all the teaching was done in affiliated colleges. Okay. That's the way it worked. But so it's a completely different kind of setup. So naturally, undergraduate teaching was done in colleges. But in those days, initially, these colleges, some of them were just as good as anywhere. They're good scholars, teachers and so on. When the universities became teaching departments and so on, somehow they acquired a higher prestige, and college teachers, teaching in a college was not considered as good as teaching in.
Right.
So they couldn't recruit the same kind of teachers they were able to recruit earlier in later period.
I see.
For example, in Madras, which was leading place for mathematics in the 40s and 50s, early 50s, it was the leading place. All the research was being done in colleges. There was a department of mathematics, but it had a faculty of 2 or something.
I see.
That's it, and and didn't have a professor as a reader and a lecturer, perhaps. That's it. But all the students doing research were doing research with professors at the universities. There was a man by the name Ananda Rao, who was a well-known mathematician of that time. Student Hardy himself, and there was a Father Racine in Laila College.
Correct.
These were people who were guiding research students at the university.
I see. Okay.
So they were at the colleges. That's the kind of thing that was happening.
Okay.
There was one man in the university who was also doing it. That was Vaidyanath Swami.
Vaidyanath Swami. Right. Yeah. Since the early days, when MTTS was formally launched, to this day, it has achieved its milestones in terms of the number of students that it has trained, and very broadly speaking, without going into the specifics of the milestones, has it, very broadly speaking, met the objectives that it had set out to achieve? As a member of the funding agency and overseeing the project from an overseeing body, what are your thoughts on that?
I've stopped being a member of the national board. It's now 10 years almost. Okay. But anyway, the point is, actually it's more than 10 years. In any case, the objectives were to create a a cadre, if you like, of mathematicians who are good scholars and who are also will be doing good research and that kind of thing. And that objective has been achieved. And the point is that I do not know if Commendation had the idea that there will be world beaters among them.
But there could very well be.
There can be. I do not. I do not know I know who are the youngsters who are doing really very well now on the scene, but I do not know if any of them have gone through MTTS or not. You see, the point is that very often MTTS probably attracts students who are talented but are not so self-confident. The self-confident ones are likely to directly go to the research institutions and take that kind of thing. So the chances are that the self-confident ones are the ones who are much more talented than the others. But the MTTS has an important role to fulfill, because the point is that the big achievers, researchers are important, but without a milieu of good scholars, maybe not of the same caliber, but maybe less talented, without them, these people will not even be recognized for what they are in this milieu. So it's important even for their survival that the next level people should be in, and certainly MTTS has produced a number of people at the next level. And that's a very useful and important contribution to mathematics in this country.
An important component of mathematical learning is one's ability to get comfortable with the idea, overcome the initial phobia, and get to a point where one can play around, experiment, make mistakes, and then finally find that eureka moment. Is MTTS successful in doing that?
No, I don't quite think this is applicable to MTTS, because the students come there don't have any phobia for mathematics. They may be mildly diffident about their own abilities and so on. They come there because they like mathematics.
So you're saying that so you're saying that there's a big difference between not being confident enough and being fundamentally averse to mathematics.
There's a big difference. Very often the students who want to take mathematics as a graduate degree, they do because they like mathematics, or sometimes of course it happens because it's some kind of last resort option, because they can't get into anything else. Okay, I'll get a degree in mathematics. I don't think the latter kind will ever come to MTTS. It is the ones who like mathematics and they find that they don't like what's going on in the class, but they still know that they like mathematics, which makes them a little diffident about whether they are good enough or not. So those are the kinds of students who probably come to MTTS.
Wonderful.
So the phobia people, I don't think.
Wrong word to use that.
Phobia people, I don't think will come anywhere near MTTS.
Okay. So this encouragement to make mistakes, learn from mistakes, and not be afraid to make those mistakes in full public view, so to say, is an essential ingredient of the MTTS.
Absolutely.
It's and you strongly recommend it to all young learners.
Yeah. I say that I always said that every learner will come to Tata Institute. Even there, the talented ones are taken, but they're surrounded by talent. So everyone is a little afraid of showing off. Being shown up their ignorance and things like that kind. The first thing I tell students is that when I handle a class is ask questions. You may think it's stupid. It actually may not be stupid. And secondly, even if it's stupid, so what?
Absolutely. Right.
You won't, unless you have no fear of asking stupid questions, you will not understand many things. This is the kind of thing I used to say to my students when I was teaching them. Of course, I was teaching.
You followed it yourself in your own career and in your own.
Well, I learned that fairly early in.
Right.
Okay. Nobody told me explicitly that, but I could see it happening at the Tata Institute with fellow students.
So you kind of picked it up from the air.
Kind of picked it up in the air. Yeah. Right.
And one thing that is said about the MTTS program is that they are, and I use this word with a great deal of caution, Professor Raghunathan. They say that we are not elitist. They say we are not elitist. We don't pick the best and create them into better than the best. We pick just about anybody who is interested. Considering that we have a huge youth population in our country right now, and the so-called demographic advantage and all that, and how rapidly things are changing, do you think universities should stop obsessing about merit and taking anybody who is interested and let merit flower on its own and create the circumstances?
The point, you see, an important component of talent, which is often ignored by the universities, is that interest. They must find it subject exciting. I don't give a damn if they don't get marks. If I can see that the guy is excited by mathematics, I'm impressed. I think he has talent. The fact that he has not scored marks can be innumerable reasons. You have to, within a specific given time, you have to think the right solution and write it down and things like that. Some people may not be able to do it.
Absolutely.
So the point is that in fact, I was earlier talking there. I said talent is something which is very difficult to judge. The one for me, a trace of talent is there if the guy finds mathematics interesting. If I talk to him and say he finds it interesting, if I say some mathematical fact, and if his eye lights up, I see that he has talent. That's the way I look at it.
This is an incredibly important moment in the evolution of Bhāvanā, because we reach out to young students and we want to tell them that the real joy of doing science, is actually in getting the hands dirty.
Right.
At every moment, and you should get more excited precisely at those moments when you're actually stuck with something, because that is your maximum opportunity to learn. So this fact coming from a legendary mathematician like MS Raghunathan should gladden many youngsters' hearts and tell them that it's okay to fail. It is all right if you don't understand something. Take hope, take heart, and stay at it, because that's how the best are identified. And Professor Raghunathan is saying it, it's not me. So I think you should take it at face value. Right. There are certain things that are important about the NBHM's role as far as MTTS is concerned, and I want to stress on that, Professor. You said that NBHM was kind of a body that came up in the 80s. Your thoughts on that, and what particularly led to the...
See, there was a kind of move by some mathematicians through the Indian Mathematical Society to take mathematics out of the hands of the Department of Atomic Energy. See, there is something called allocation of business in the cabinet, and way back in Nehru's cabinet in the 50s.
In the 50s?
In the 50s. Soon after the Department of Atomic Energy was formed,
right.
the higher mathematics and nuclear physics became the responsibility of the Department of Atomic Energy.
Was there a particular reason for that?
I think the main reason was that Baba was interested in having mathematics under his umbrella.
Oh.
And Baba was the Secretary of Department of Atomic Energy.
Right.
That I think was the main reason. For example, physics, rest of the physics apart from nuclear physics was allocated to the Department of Science and Technology.
Oh, I see.
And others, humanities subjects all went to Department of no human resources, in those days called education, I suppose.
Right.
So it was the allocation of business for this peculiar reason that Baba was interested in it, and Baba was close to Nehru. It was allocated to the Department of Atomic Energy. And there was a move on the part of some mathematicians, essentially based in the north, in Delhi and neighboring areas, to have this taken out of the Department of Atomic Energy and given to one of the departments, either science or human resources. Now, the main reason for this was there was, of course, a certain amount of complaint that Department of Atomic Energy, the only money it spent on mathematics was all through Tata Institute, and other organizations was not getting any money and things of that kind.
I see.
There is some truth in this, without question. It was giving some money, but
roughly what was the order of magnitude of the budget at that time? That was
the kind of money that other organization would, other than Tata Institute would get, would be under 1 crore.
And the TIFR's own budget would be?
TIFR's budget was probably over 1 crore. That, but mathematics only
is a part of the
TIFR budget. I don't remember what the Tata Institute budget was.
But significantly greater than what the other.
It was certainly greater than what was being paid to
the rest of the.
So there was some legitimacy to that complaint, without question. On the other hand, the people who were really moving. They were not particularly good mathematicians, not in my opinion, and they were also after a certain amount of power, which they could wield if the headquarters of the department was in Delhi. These were Delhi and neighborhood-based people, and they had already plenty of clout in places like UGC, therefore Department of Education, and maybe also the Department of Science and Technology, if it existed at that time. So they wanted things shifted there so that they could play a role in funding, whereas the Department of Atomic Energy had not given them such a role. It relied practically on mathematics at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, whose credentials were certainly superior to those outside. And there were a few others like Professor Bhāvanā outside who were also
in
part
Punjab
of this,
University.
in Punjab University, Chandigarh, who was also part of this committee and so on. And C.R. Rao from ISI Delhi was also a member of the committee which decided about funding. So it was part of an even bigger organization called Board of Research in Nuclear Sciences.
I see.
But the kind of money they spent was under 1 crore, and this is largely because they didn't think the projects that were presented were worthwhile supporting.
I see.
They were not of good quality. This is the problem. But the people who presented these projects were of course not happy that their projects were not rejected, and so they wanted it out of the country. And the matter was referred to the Tata Institute because it was the prime institute for mathematics, and also to the Board of Research of Nuclear Sciences. And ultimately the Tata Institute recommended that there is a case for the people had also proposed that there should be a National Council for Mathematical Research along the lines of National Council of Historical Research, National Council of Social Sciences Research, which existed already. They wanted something that along those lines. But under the other one of the other departments. So the Tata Institute suggested that the DAE retain charge of mathematics, but create such an organization as the National Council for Mathematics, and increase funding for other institutions outside outside the DAE fold, and thereby this what's the word I want? These complaints can be addressed. And the Department of Atomic Energy agreed to the program, and that's how the National Board for Higher Mathematics is created. And it's a kind of unique organization in the sense that I don't think anywhere else there is a exclusively mathematical funding organization set up by a government. All science would come under one umbrella, but here exclusively for mathematics. This is quite unusual, I think. I'm not sure, but
And has the NBHM benefited from greater and greater budgetary support over the...
NBHM's budget has steadily increased.
It has increased.
Over the years.
But having been at the helm of affairs and also having seen the pervasive influence of mathematics in all walks of human life, do you think this budgetary increase is in line with where it should be going?
No, the thing is that NBHM has been pragmatic. You see, you can ask, if you ask for more money will probably come from the Department of Atomic Energy.
Right.
And especially if you talk about applications elsewhere outside mathematics and such kind, there will be, I don't think there will be any problem getting more money out of the Department of Energy.
Right.
But on the other hand, NBHM itself is very careful about it, because they want to deliver. When they say something, will do it to deliver. And if they perceive that you can make grandiose plans about applying mathematics in some area and getting big benefits out of it, but do we have the wherewithal? Do we have the human resources for that at this point?
Absolutely.
If we had it, and if it had, there's a good project coming up, certainly NBHM will be able to support it and get the required money from the DAE.
Nice.
That is the situation.
Okay.
So, but the problem is that we have a long way to go before we can achieve those things. For example, in pure mathematics,
right,
the kind of achievements done by Indians in India has been reasonable. I wouldn't say it's great, but some of them are performed at the highest level without question.
Right.
But as
on an average, taken the country as a whole,
the averages are not particularly good, but the peaks are very good.
The peaks are good,
but there are not enough of those peaks.
They're not as frequent as you would like them to be.
Certainly,
and as many as you would like them to be.
Exactly. Even in pure mathematics, in applied mathematics, situation is much more, much worse. Okay. The problem is that you don't have the kind of peaks we have in pure mathematics.
Far fewer.
Far fewer. In fact, one can even ask if there
are any.
There are, I suppose, but I mean, okay, there are some peaks, but the peaks are not as tall as the peaks in pure mathematics. Okay. This is certainly true. Okay. And there are not enough people to perform at a certain level, which gives NBHM confidence. Well, these guys can do this. They present the project.
But Professor Raghunathan, turning the argument around, isn't that just the right thing to say that this is the reason why you have to cast the net wider and put in more budgetary support and involve more people?
The budgetary support can only be for training people. It cannot be for projects which require trained people.
Correct.
If they have a training project, yes, NBHM will be able to support. But how are you going to train them? How do you institute training project? Because you need experts in the area who can do the proper training.
But isn't this the classical chicken and egg problem?
It is to some extent, yes. But the way, for example, the Tata Institute, for instance, in the beginning, what they did was to import people.
Yes.
To give lectures and so on. Graduate courses, which are routine things done in Western universities, could not be handled here because they didn't have enough human resources.
The genesis of the TF are lecture notes.
Right. All these people came from Europe and America, mostly from Europe, mostly from France and Germany, and they gave courses. There were only two mathematicians of repute at the Tata Institute, Chandrasekharan and Raghunathan, and but they were also in their own fields, which are somewhat narrow, so they could not really cater to the upcoming generation of mathematicians who may want to branch out into different areas.
Correct.
So what Chandrasekharan did was to persuade many European mathematicians to visit India for long periods and give graduate courses, from which the local people picked up a lot of scholarship, and also suggestions for future problems to look at and things like that kind. And so we had external expertise coming in to do this. If you have a project under which you can do that, NBHM will be willing to support. Okay, if getting external support, and unfortunately it is not so easy to get from expert from outside these days. The thing is that in the 50s and 60s, when the Tata Institute did this, there was a lot of idealism among European intellectuals. They wanted to help third world countries.
Not so
many of them were leftists with that persuasion. These days there's not that kind of altruism doesn't exist. And there's a lot of competition within even pure science and things like that. The moment if you're away from the center of action for 3 months, you think you lose out. There's lots of things happen, I'm not participating. That kind of attitude exists these days. Unfortunately, so in fact, Tata Institute is unable to get anybody visitor for long periods like 3 months. And somebody comes only if there's a local expert of equal standing with whom he can interact.
Oh, okay.
And he's not all that interested in giving lectures to
waiting students.
Waiting students. It's not.
Right.
That's the kind of situation now. So it's, if somebody can get a project along those lines, it should be possible for NBHM to support it. But actually, in some sense, maybe I'm not quite correct there, because the DA support itself has been somewhat declining. The attitude is declining. They have not reduced the quantum of support, but their attitude has become a little different at the highest level. They don't seem to perceive the NBHM activities as something worthwhile to support at this level and higher. So because of that, there are also some difficulty. But this may be a temporary phase. Yes. I don't know. And also because in the recent years there have been some budget cuts.
Right across.
Right across. But mathematics is a 0.1% fraction or even less of the total budget. So they need not impose a cut on mathematics. So it makes a very little difference to them. But they still do. And because of that, things are not all that hunky-dory these days.
I see. But going forward and looking at so many young people taking up mathematics, probably not to the level of competence that you would have liked, but do you see hope for Indian mathematics in the future?
I think so. I like to believe that there is hope for the future. And in fact, there was a number of students joining Tata Institute was very low for a whole decade. But in the recent years, it has picked up.
I see.
Number of students have joined.
What particularly do you attribute this to?
Well, in general, I think things like MTTS helped, and some undergraduate institutions have cropped up, like CMI in Chennai and ISI itself. There are good undergraduate institutions which have developed, and so this you find that students are well trained and they come. So that is, and also in general, many initiatives taken by the NBHM has attracted talented students into mathematics who may not have taken to mathematics earlier.
Nice.
For example, the Olympiad program have projected mathematics as a very worthwhile thing to pursue, challenge to pursue, and that is many students who probably would not have gone into mathematics have probably been attracted to mathematics because of the Olympiad program. Though in some sense it's a skewed program in some sense, because the kind of mathematics talent that the Olympiad demands is a little different from what you really need for research. But that apart, but you can identify the talent. That is worthwhile. And of course, the NBHM also had something called the Nurture program, and which was also helpful in developing interest in mathematics. And many of these students, and one other phenomenon is that in recent years, the number of good students in mathematics coming from Bengal has increased considerably.
We see that quite often in many universities. And
for this,
what do you think?
Well, maybe it's a joke, but it's very likely it is because Bengali students don't know of existence for other opportunities. Bengal, under the leader in the previous political leadership and so on, did not develop industry. There's not the same IT boom which has happened in places like Chennai or Hyderabad and Bangalore and so on. There's no IT boom in Bengal, and so the students are still doing old-fashioned thinking of going into this. Maybe
that's an interesting conjecture.
No, the point is that physics has always been dominated by Bengalis.
Correct.
But not mathematics. Mathematics at an earlier point was dominated by Tamils, in fact. But now the focus is shifted. It is really Bengali students who are doing best.
That's wonderful to hear. And you have interacted with Professor Kumareshan for the last 40 years now. Your personal chemistry with him, how has it been through the...
Well, we've always had a pleasant relationship. It's not as if it's always smooth. They're always both of us are what should I say? Fairly strong characters. So it's inevitable that there will be
opinionated.
I'm sure.
Or shall I say openly expressive?
Absolutely. I mean, both of us are opinionated has a negative connotation.
No, I meant in a positive sense.
Yeah, but fairly strong opinions.
Fairly strong opinions.
And also fairly adamant in holding on to it. But so there's bound to be a certain friction, but we have respect for each other. And it's I'm particularly happy when I hear that he thinks I inspired him for certain things. Though I wouldn't have guessed it until he told me so.
Well, we are at almost at the fag end of the interview, Professor Raghunathan. They say that among all the tests that life throws at you, the most stringent test of them all is the test of time. The test of time. And if something can stand the test of time with all the changes that come alongside it, then it is really something worth looking at with awe and admiration. MTTS is 25 years old and definitely past its initial teething troubles. Where do you see the next 25 going?
I expect it can go on because a pattern has been set, but of course you need new people to take over. It's up to Kumaresan to identify the new person to lead the whole thing. He has already built a team, but among them he has to identify a leader or bring in a new leader if needed. If he is able to do that, it should be possible. It should go on for another 25 years. I don't see any reason why it should.
Yeah. Okay. You are a mathematician and always work with numbers. Professor Kumaresan was telling us that 4,500 students is the total number of people who have been mentored so far. But considering that we are about 1.25 billion strong and need many, many more.
No, the point is MTTS is only
at
a supplementary program.
Yes.
The main thing is supposed to be done by the colleges.
Correct.
And until and unless the colleges improve, you cannot hope to cater to the numbers you are thinking of. No,
right.
No way.
Is there a number that we should be looking at?
The other thing is that we probably have numbers who enter mathematics is much too large. I don't think so many people should be entering mathematics for the following reason. I mean, many of them are not really interested in mathematics. What they want is a degree attached to their name, and some degree is needed. And very often it's difficult to get into courses like engineering, of course, even other science courses, because the employment prospects at the end of those courses is supposed to be better, and so people want to enter those courses. And if you cannot get into those courses, then you get into mathematics. That is the attitude. That's a social reality.
Right.
With that kind of thing, many people enter. So maybe half of them are not really interested in mathematics, and they've done this because of that. So maybe the number which is entering the thing is a misleading thing. I don't think it indicates interest in mathematics as such. In some sense, the clamor for higher education is all based on the fact that people perceive that higher education means higher economic empowerment.
Right.
Okay, and that's the sole for many parents. That's the sole purpose of higher education.
Absolutely.
This attitude is to change, and of course, economic empowerment is important, but it should not depend on higher education. The kind of economic empowerment should be decided on the basis of what you give society.
True.
For example, the humble cleaner, this guy is performing probably better service to society than a person like me who has been doing research. What am I contributing to the improvement of society? But what kind of economic empowerment does that person have? A sweeper. That has to change. It's this big social change that is needed. The compensation that a person receives for service done to society must be commensurate with what he does. And all these fat cats executives for big companies who are making profits for those companies and nothing worthwhile for society, they are earning enormous amounts of money. If that changes, then there won't be so much clamor for so-called higher education.
And then
there can be
things could change.
Things could change. I don't know if this is all political economic problem. I don't know how it's going to get solved. In the kind of differences in incomes between the people who perform really worthwhile things for society and those who are fleecing the society for And take this example. For instance, a guy like Shah Rukh Khan or Amir Khan will make maybe 2 crores at one commercial which lasts for 2 minutes.
Yes.
Whereas a school teacher who has been, well, this guy is what he is doing is essentially brainwashing kids into drinking cola. He doesn't need. There is a school teacher who is supposed to train minds. Or at the fag end of his retirement, his total emoluments may not exceed 2 crores.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With this kind of situation, it's I don't. I mean, the problems are enormous. The school teacher, for instance, what about education at the school level?
Absolutely.
Undergraduate level is bad, but school level is equally bad.
Absolutely.
I don't see the end of these problems unless the government is willing to spend money on education and completely revise things. There must be some, maybe not an armed revolution, but an economic revolution has to take place before kind of differences in income across society exists.
Right. Yeah. Ending on a slightly happier note, Professor Raghunathan. So let's wish MTTS the very best for the next
long life
and
continued success in its endeavors.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking with you, sir. Thank you very much.